Earth Day. The Senate will please come to order. We'll begin this Earth Day with a moment of silence or reflection, move a devotional. Thank you. Are there any announcements this morning? We have a number of House bills for referral under Rule 31. 709, an act relating to miscellaneous agricultural subjects affecting the revenues of the state under Rule 31 is referred to the Committee on Finance. H 510, an act relating to a Vermont child tax credit and the Vermont Security income tax exclusion affecting the expenditures of Rule 31 is the Committee on Appropriations. H 546, an act relating to racial justice statistics affecting the expenditures of the state under Rule 31 is referred to the Committee on Appropriations. And H 729, an act relating to miscellaneous judiciary procedures affecting expenditures of the state under Rule 31 is referred to the Committee on Appropriations. This brings us to the orders of the day. We have H 548 on the calendar, but the reporter is not here, so we will pass over and move to H 411. We have on the calendar for action H 411, an act relating to the retrieval and use of covered wild animals. Read for the first time on February 23rd. It was referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of H 411.
H 411, an act relating to the retrieval and use of covered wild animals.
Pleased to recognize the Senator Madison and the Chair of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, Senator the report.
Thank you, Madam President. Voted unanimously without changes, so I will be reporting the bill that you are receiving. And while that's coming around to you, we've had this is the third Fish and Wildlife bill we looked at this year. Other ones involve some controversy that we've arrived at a compromise on. This one has no controversy behind it, for the most part, because of the fact that it's supported by people interested primarily in animal rights as well as hunters themselves. It relates to the retrieval and use of covered wild animals. You may have also heard it referred to as wanton waste bill. So in other words, the hunting has a long respected tradition of when you take an animal, you're taking that animal for its use, not just for the sport of killing an animal and then not putting it to any use. So currently under the law, there's no provision that allows game wardens to respond to complaints about animals being shot and left. This happens, I think, I know that in the area where I am, that happens with coyotes with some regularity. So again, both hunters and non-hunters alike have said this is not a respectful version of hunting. And we should have a way of distinguishing it from hunting and providing game warrants for the work of respondents. So I'll go through the bill. Section 1 provides definitions that are covered, what we mean by process, and another fit for consumption or use. Going to 4922, covered wild animals. The whole bill here is a person shall not intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly kill a covered wild animal, intentionally or knowingly fail to make a reasonable effort to retrieve the covered wild animal, and use the covered wild animal as provided in the subchapter. So, retrieval and use. Then we go on to explain these terms. Use is defined in page 2, section 4923. A person who retrieves a lawfully taken covered wild animal, or a person to whom the lawfully taken wild animal is transferred, shall retain the animal in the person's possession until it is processed as food, or processed for its fur, hide, or feathers, or used for taxidermy. The inedible or unusable portions then may be disposed of pursuant to the requirements of the chapter. So it doesn't apply in every instance, and there, sub B, you get into where it does not apply. When the covered wild animal is unfit for consumption use, an animal taken could be diseased. You wouldn't want to require someone to be consuming that. And then sub 2 is coyotes taken by a lawful means other than trapping, provided that the coyote is retrieved and disposed of pursuant to the chapter. In 4924, we've gone through some exceptions. So the title does not apply. 1, when the failure to retrieve or salvage and use, or the failure to retain the covered wild animal is beyond the control of the person due to A, theft. Secondly, B, unavoidable loss in the field to a wild animal, as in the game you were taking was taken by another animal. C, lack of legal access to property where a wounded or dead covered wild animal is located, including when signage on the property would lead a reasonable person to believe that hunting is prohibited in the land. So if you were, you had shot an animal that was not killed on the spot and then it fled into posted property, you would not be allowed to retrieve because you wouldn't have legal access to that property. Sub D, there are other circumstances that prevent salvage, retrieval, or retention. In 2, we go on to talk about another reason that the rules are applying is that when the taking is in order to defend person or property, including defense of property, as authorized under the chapter. 3, when the covered animal is sick or diseased. 4, when a state, federal, or municipal law enforcement officer is acting in the course of their duty. And 5, when following generally accepted hunting or trapping practices for retrieval of animal, when that practice is set forth under this chapter or by other rules, or approved as a best practice by the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. So an example of that, when you field dress a deer or a bear, you're not retrieving the entire animal, and that's because field dressing is approved as the best practice by the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. Now that gets us to 4925, bottom page 3. What do we mean by disposal? Proper disposal. So from place, leaving, dumping, or abandoning a parts of a wild animal, 1, on a public right of way or highway, 2, on public property posted in accordance with safety zone, or 1, the hunting conditions of the title. Without permission of the owner or former agent. And thirdly, where prohibited by state or municipal law. At section 2, the effective date, and it is upon passage. We heard from variety of people, and they include Chris Bradley, the Federation of Sportsmen, Federation of Sportsmen's Club, Commissioner Christopher Herrick, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Councilor Mike O'Grady, Legislative Council, Representative Lee Sheldon, Bill Sponsor, and Charles Storrow, partner of Canine Public Affairs, representing the Vermont Wildlife Coalition. The committee vote was 5-0, and he asked for
The report being favorable, the question is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for the question? The senator from Caledonia is recognized.
Madam President, may I interrogate the presenter?
May.
Madam President, I'm
Reading this for the first time, and I don't see any kind of a penalty attached to it. Am I missing something?
I'll have to ask for a brief recess to get the details correct on penalty, but maybe before asking for that recess, I should inquire and see if there are any other questions that might be
Well,
council.
I thank you, Madam President. Actually, there is one other. As I read section 4922, person shall recklessly kill a covered animal and intentionally or knowingly fail to make a reasonable effort to retrieve a wild animal and use it as provided. If I am traveling at 85 miles per hour, obviously over the speed limit of any roadside city, there are some officers who would characterize that as negligent operation. I'm curious, if I strike one of the covered animals immediately, but it wanders off and I recognize that it's injured, is it my responsibility to make a reasonable effort to retrieve it nevertheless and follow it wherever I find it?
Thank you for those two questions. And I would ask for a brief recess to consult with the council.
The Senate will stand in recess until the fall. The Senate will please come to order. Returning from a brief recess, and I believe the senator from Caledonia had the floor.
It's not meant to be a disparaging remark. As I understand it, the presenter has discussed this with legal counsel, and I state what I believe is the answer in both situations, starting with the anecdote that I gave. The term recklessly appearing here would likely lead to confusion as to whether an individual has to retrieve. And as I understand it, I won't put words in the mouth of the presenter, but the committee is willing to strike the word recklessly, eliminate that confusion from the document. The second question was there any reference to a penalty? There is not explicit reference to a penalty, but as I understood it, Madam President, the way that these laws are enforced is there's an automatic reference. I'm not articulating that well, but there is an automatic reference to the penalties and wildlife violations. And so everybody should know this does result in up to a $1,000 fine and a certain number of 5 points on your license. And with that, I believe my questions have been answered. If the presenter wishes to make any further response to make sure everybody knows what the answers are, I'll stay standing.
The senator from Addison is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate the inquiry on the floor and the additional clarifications that came out of the conversation. On Senate Natural Resources and Energy, reviews proposed amendments, remove the word recklessly and make other adjustments to the line as a friendly amendment that supports that 5.
I believe I do need a motion for the striking of recklessly in section 4922, if that's correct. Senator from Caledonia is recognized.
I believe it would be correct, Madam President, but I would probably seek to have Judge Counsel draft that in preparation for third.
So we will come back to that then, a third reading as an amendment, but now the question still is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 411. There has been a request to return to H 548. Unless there's an objection, we'll do so. We have on the calendar for action H 48, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis establishment procedures, read for the first time on March 22nd. It was referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which reports it has considered the bill, recommends the bill be amended as set forth on pages 2940 to 2947 of today's calendar, that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of H 548.
H 548, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis establishment procedures.
The senator from Bennington, Senior Senator, Senator Sears, is recognized for the report of the Committee on Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam President. Most of this bill is somewhat technical in nature. There are some areas with some controversy, and I'll try to go over those areas, but the Committee on Judiciary heard from many folks about our attempts to develop a cannabis market in Vermont and some of the challenges that we face. And I remind ourselves that what we're competing with are other states surrounding us, such as New York and Massachusetts, at least in the southern part of the state and the western part of the state. And we're also competing with an illegal market, which is part of the unusual focus of a cannabis attempt to legalize, have this program provide cannabis legally and also at the same time protect Vermonters. So the first section of the bill adds definitions regarding child deterrent packaging. This definition works in conjunction with Section 4, which removes the requirement for child-resistant packaging for cannabis flower. Child-resistant packaging is still a requirement for all cannabis products. Anything that might have a psychoactive effect if it accidentally is consumed, including edibles, oils, tinctures, concentrates, and so forth. And yet, the requirement for child-resisting packaging means the packaging cannot be reused and, with very few exceptions, recycled or composted. This definition will assure that the packaging will deter a child from accessing cannabis flower, but will push the industry towards things like glass jars with basic locking mechanisms or tear-resistant sealed bags like the ones that coffee beans come in. In this section, the owner is not a substantive change, just more specifically for the sake of the FBI fingerprinting issue, which we'll get into below the definition of owner. Principal, the same, the definition of principal is not a huge change, but provides more specificity for the sake of the FBI fingerprinting issue, which I will get to in a second. Section 2 authorizes the Cannabis Control Board to regulate all synthetic cannabinoids. There are many known and unknown psychoactive cannabinoids like delta-8 THC that exist in the cannabis plant. Hemp farmers are able to distill these cannabinoids from their legally grown hemp and sell them. The Agency of Agriculture recently sent a letter saying that this was not permitted under the hemp license. But clearly, this is a legal gray area. And this section gives the Cannabis Control Board the authority to regulate synthetic cannabinoids. I can tell you that we are going to use our product registration process to keep them off the street shelves until we know more about them. Section 3, and perhaps one of the more controversial section, removes the prohibition on sale of solid concentrates above the 60% THC level. And this was done partly to ensure that we would be competitive with the black market, but also with other states. And that's the intent of, the key tenet of Act 64 was the intent of the General Assembly to move as much of the illegal cannabis market as possible into the regular market for purposes of consumer protection and public safety. Prohibiting a product does not eliminate the demand for it. Concentrates are widely available on the illicit market and are being produced with dangerous solvents and additives. It would be a net benefit for the public health and public safety to regulate them instead of banning them for legal sale. Concentrates are very dangerous to produce, and people are currently using highly explosive materials in their basements and garages to produce them. We should move the production of them to the highly regulated Cannabis Control Board and Fire Safety licensed cannabis manufacturers. Madam President, you really don't know what you're getting with the black market concentrates. Frankly, I don't know. I don't use the black market for anything. There could be additives or residuals that are harmful for human consumption. The CDC reported that the vast majority of the 2019 to 20 eBay ALI cases, 2,807 hospitalizations, 68 deaths were from illicit market cannabis products containing unauthorized additives, most commonly vitamin E accentrate. Section 4 permits child deterrent packaging for cannabis flower. And child-resistant packaging remains for all other cannabis products, as I said earlier. Rationale I went over. Section also clarifies that cannabis products can contain both THC and CBD. There's a lot of science that consuming products containing both THC and CBD are healthier than THC-only products. This section cleans up parts of the statutes that are seen to suggest that CBD cannot be present in THC-containing products. Section 5 points to a fingerprinting issue as well as an alternative plan to deal with it. The FBI denied the Cannabis Control Board authorization request to receive fingerprint-supported criminal history records on the grounds that our statutes were not sufficiently clear with respect to whose records we were requesting. These denials are happening all around the country in states with adult-use cannabis markets. This section, as well as the amendments in Section 1, will hopefully provide the FBI with the specificity that they need. In the event that the FBI denies the Cannabis Control Board's request again, this section would permit the Cannabis Control Board to use non-fingerprint supported checks through a third party, such as a private investigator that specializes in professional background screening. Section 6 allows the cannabis workers to move from one business to another without having to reapply for a new employee ID card. Currently, the law requires employee cards and therefore employees be tied to a specific cannabis establishment. This amendment promotes worker mobility and flexibility. This section also allows the Cannabis Control Board to rely on fingerprint-based identity history summary records when issuing an employee ID card. This is very technical and another consequence of our FBI denial. Sections 7 and 8 clarify the intent, that the original intent of Act 164 was that the one license type per entity rule applies to integrated licenses. Section 7 also allows testing facilities to have multiple locations. Act 164 attempted to prevent big companies from overtaking the Vermont industry by saying that each business entity can only have one license and operate at one location. This is the first in the kind of anti-franchising policy, but testing is always the bottleneck in adult use states. This provision waives the one location rule for testing labs only. Section 9 permits retailers to package cannabis. Retailers are currently not permitted to package cannabis for consumer sale, meaning that these costs are shifted to cultivators, product manufacturers, and/or wholesalers. We think that there are cost benefits to cultivators, efficiencies, and less consumer waste if retailers could, for instance, receive vacuum-sealed containers of cannabis from cultivators and package it into individual containers for consumers' safe sale themselves. Section also permits online pre-order for in-person pickup. I just want to make clear, this does not allow you to go online and have your product delivered. This means that you can go online like you might to a restaurant and pick up your goods. It will save long lines that we've seen in other states, people waiting to get into the cannabis establishment and finding out the product is all gone. Section 10 ensures integrated licenses that own a cultivation license and a testing license cannot test their own products, but put another way, requires independent third-party testing for everyone. Section 11 prohibits butane and hexane extraction by everyone, including the medical dispensaries. The 2017 Home Grow Bill contained a provision that explicitly criminalized extractions using butane and hexane unless you're a dispensary. This eliminates that permission given the dispensaries, which don't use them anyway. Section 12 sunsets an advantage that the integrated licensees have to grow unlimited canopy. Because the integrated licenses are permitted to operate 5 months before other retailers and would be the only entities with legally grown cannabis during that window, they were authorized as of February 1, 2022, to grow unlimited amounts of cannabis to supply as much of the market as they could. This provision sunsets that advantage on October 1st, when other cultivators and retailers would be licensed. Madam President, we had at our committee hearings the fine work of Legislative Counsel Michelle Childs, Harriet Fox, CEO and co-founder of Meristream Farms, who was in the hemp business, Carrie Geiger, Policy Director, Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management, Agency of Agriculture, Robin Gribben, a legislative aide from Colorado, James Pepper, the chair of the Cannabis Control Board, Jeffrey Pizzaluto, executive director and co-founder of Vermont Growers Association, Brad Roberts, emergency medical specialist in Colorado, the executive director of NORML, Nicholas Sherman, Libby Stout, an addiction psychiatrist from Colorado, and Jill Sordoff-Gurin, policy and communications consultant at the Vermont Medical Society. Madam President, your committee vote was 5-0-0 on this bill, and we urge the Senate to concur.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bills recommended by the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? The senator from Chittenden is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to first thank the chair of the Judiciary for passing over this bill yesterday to allow for us to hear from folks about Section 3 in particular, given that there may be some public health implications when the cap is taken off of the 60% THC concentrate. Our committee this morning had a discussion with James Pepper, the executive director of the Cannabis Control Board, Michelle Childs of Legislative Counsel, and then a member of the Vermont Medical Society. And what we heard was there are concerns about how this policy goes forward. It's a difficult question, and it essentially puts in place of Sophie's Choice, where we allow for the continued extraction and concentration of THC in the illicit market, utilizing some of these toxic chemicals such as hexane. That's one choice. And then the other choice is not having a cap and the public health concern about health consequences associated with the higher concentration of THC. And we did hear about that from the Medical Society. Having said that, our committee feels that, historically, we have looked at medical marijuana in health and welfare. In fact, the bill first passed out of our committee several years ago. I don't remember the exact date. And we will continue to have an interest in the health consequences of the use of THC, regardless of source and concentration. The issue for us is that we certainly need to have more testimony on this. We are not going to hold this bill up at this time at all. We may consider over the next few days how we wish to proceed on H548 and this Section 3, especially with regard to the 6% concentration being removed. Madam President, I am reassured that the work that the Judiciary Committee has been very complete, and that the work of the Cannabis Control Board is also very complete. And the discussion that we had there is that guidance will help to direct how in the future and currently and in the future the concentration of THC will be evaluated. We heard about New Jersey, we heard about research going on there, we've heard about Colorado, we hear about other states. It is unfortunate that Congress has acted as it has on marijuana. It doesn't belong in the class of drug that it currently exists. So all of which to say, Madam President, just as we are confronted with something quite difficult, our committee will continue to consider this, but at this time, we do not have a recommendation to be made and think that the continuing action and activities on behalf of the Cannabis Control Board should go forward, and the bill, I will personally vote for the bill as it is now. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary. The question now is, shall the bill be read for the third time? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 548. We will now move to H 736, Transportation Program and miscellaneous changes to laws related to transportation. It was read for the first time on March 30th. It was referred to the Committee on Transportation, which reports it has considered the bill, recommends the bill be amended as set forth on pages 2947 to 2988 of today's calendar, and that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Finance, which reports that the bill should be amended as recommended by the Committee on Transportation, and that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. Finally, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which reports that the recommendation of amendment of the Committee on Transportation be amended as set forth on pages 2988 to 2989 of today's calendar, and that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of H 736.
H 736, Act relating to the Transportation Program and miscellaneous changes to laws related to transportation.
The senator from Grand Isle, Senator Mazza, is recognized for the Committee on Transportation.
Madam President, with great pleasure, the Senate Transportation Committee brings you the largest transportation budget ever at $837 million. It's gigantic. A lot of good things that's happened. This represents an increase of last year's budget. This record level of funding is driven by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a 5-year federal transportation funding bill that provides record federal funding to states. A 30% increase in core highway formula funding, a new $225 million general fund bridge program, a new $21 million general fund electric vehicle charging infrastructure program. As we know, we're increasing our electric vehicles and we have to have charging. This year's paving budget is $158 million, 32% increase over last year. We usually represent about $100 million, $103 million. So $158 million is gigantic. This represents the highest ever investment in paving by the agency and includes 64 construction projects covering 590 miles of paving and 91 miles of rehabilitation to widen shoulders in support of bicycle and pedestrian access and mobility. So we can see we are working hard to make friendly to bicycles and pedestrians, helping on the shoulders that when we rehabilitate the highway. The roadway program is up 38% with a total investment of $51 million, funding 37 projects to construct and reach the sector. This year, the new federal general fund bridge program will support the increase of funding for the town highway bridge program by $30 million, an almost doubling of the program. Additionally, bridges funded in this program, which are off the federal aid system, will be funded at 100% federal, saving towns and the state significant funding resources. Bicycle, pedestrian, and transportation alternatives program funding will see a 19% increase, with $25 million implementing 47 construction projects and design of 42 additional projects across 73 Vermont communities. Yes, that's correct, 73 Vermont communities. We continue our commitment to implementing programs to reduce carbon emissions from the transportation sector by investing $36 million across multiple efforts.
$6.25 million in EV fast charging on highway network, $10 million for EV charging for multifamily dwellings, workplaces, and community attractions, $14 million for new EV incentive programs and problematic support from Drive Electric Vermont, $3 million for mileage smart incentive programs for used EVs and highly efficient vehicles, $3 million to replace your ride incentive programs for efficient transportation for Vermonters, an updated goal of installing EV fast charging infrastructure within 1 mile of each interstate exit, 25 miles along the state highway, which we must have these to make a successful program for electric vehicles. Public transit will also receive historic funding at $44 million. Additional investment will include $1.2 million to provide zero fare public transit for local transit routes, which has been very popular. I know many of you have heard about this. And $1.25 million for microtransit pilot studies for communities across and continuous transit fleet electrification. There are currently 18 electric transit vehicles in operation or on order, with a plan to apply for federal funding to acquire 10. Rutland this week just put a couple electric buses into effect. I saw on TV this week. The rail program will implement $35 million in projects, including extension of the Amtrak Ethan Allen service from Rutland to Burlington, with stops at Middlebury for GENS, launching in July. This is something that we've worked on for since I've been here with Governor Howard Dean about the train from Burlington to New York City, and it's very, very exciting. It's finally going to happen. Our track is improved, and we're ready to go. Finally, and perhaps the most important and continued work to bring our Department of Motor Vehicles IT system up to modern integrated standards through the DMV core system modernization phase 2 project with an investment of $20 million in support of the collection of our transportation fund revenues derived from various taxes and fees. As we know, we talked about this modernizing DMV system for 4 years or better. Finally, it's going to begin to happen. Now, for the bill in general, I'd like to now yield to the senator from Washington County, Senator Birchler. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I would point out to the senators, this handout that you received is, I think, the most helpful way to think about the transportation budget, over $800 million that you heard the chair talk about. Sure, the issues that we've dealt with in this large part of our state expenditures that we have in the transportation bill. I just want to thank the senator from Grand Isle. I think if I did my math correct, this is the 32nd transportation bill that he's presented. So section 1, I'll do the first few sections and we're going to hand it off as we go. Section 1 is probably the most important section of the bill because it basically incorporates this white binder, which is all the projects. So if you have projects in your district, bridges, pavings, road work, it's in here. We can't print this in here, so we just say, hey, this binder is what we're incorporating into the bill. It also has some definitions. You'll see in here things like EVSE, the electric vehicle supply equipment, chargers, PEVs. There's plug-in electric vehicles that we just call electric vehicles. So those are also important if you were going to look at the language of the bill more closely. Section 2 is kind of the Senator Ash section. 4 years ago, we added this to the T-bill, which is all the parts of the transportation bill that have to deal with reducing fossil fuels and saving Vermont's money are in the Section 2. So it's not anything new. All the data that's in Section 2 are in other sections, but sometimes it's hard to find. Like you wouldn't be able to really notice that there's 254 new park and ride spaces being built in this budget if we didn't kind of pull it into this section. So this section helps if you're particularly interested in those parts of the transportation bill. You can see them all on those few pages of Section 2. It calls out all of those in that section. Section 3 is the electric vehicle supply equipment charging, or the charging stations. This is the $6.25 million that's now appropriated, authorized for AOT to spend on level 3 stations. If you remember from the definitions, level 3 is defined there as these are the fast chargers that we're going to put along the interstate, our highways, and our well-traveled corridors. These are the stations that allow folks to travel long distances or people that, tourists, visitors that are coming to the state that charge up quickly, 20 minutes, 10 minutes stops, but still get a full charge for the vehicle. That section 3 also allows for administration costs of the agency of transportation and also the outreach and marketing. We added some language in there to make sure that the agency is really reaching out to all Vermonters to make sure they know about these incentives, that they're using translation services so that new Americans know about these programs, because there's a lot of different programs to support the electrification of our transportation. We wanted to make sure all Vermonters are aware of them. Section 4, this updates our goals on these charging stations. We thought we were being pretty aggressive. I think just 2 years ago, or maybe last year, we set goals of 5 miles, a station, a level 3, a fast charger within 5 miles within 5 miles of any exit on the interstate system, and within 50 miles of any state highway. But the federal government kind of upped that, and to be able to use the federal money, we had to update these goals. So now it's within 1 mile of any exit on the 2 interstate highway systems we have, and then within 25 miles of our state highway systems. This is a goal that we're working for and using all the federal money and state money that we're putting for this to make that happen. Section 5 is the vehicle incentive programs. There's several in here. The first one for PEVs, remember that's the electric vehicles, is $12 million to support incentives for new electric vehicles. This income qualified, it depends on which kind of electric vehicle or a plug-in electric vehicle that you're buying, and what your income is how much money you would receive for an incentive for a new electric vehicle. The second one is subsection B, Mileage Smart. This is run by Capstone Community Action Agency, and this is to help low-income Vermonters buy used cars, but used cars that are high mileage. So and they could exchange a car, but also if they just need a car to get to work, because we realize that's the best way to really pull some people out of poverty is make sure they have a job and they need a vehicle to get to their work. Instead of getting a car that only gets 60 miles a gallon, this would give them an incentive up to $5,000 to get a used vehicle, like a used Prius. That would save them a lot of money in maintenance and fuel. So it's a way to help those low-income Vermonters have a vehicle that saves them money over time. The Replace Your Ride program, subsection 3, that's another $3 million for this program, which we created before but hasn't really got started yet. And this is a program to replace your ride, or it's kind of a cash for clunkers kind of program, where if you have an old vehicle that's costing you a lot of money to maintain or to fuel, this program would help you to get into a different vehicle, either a hybrid or an electric hybrid, to replace that vehicle, but it can also give you an incentive just for bus passes or an electric bike or other modes of transportation. So it's not just for vehicles. Subsection D allows the agency to spend up to $2 million basically on what I call market transformation work. Just providing incentives isn't enough to make this change in our whole transportation infrastructure over to electric. We need to advertise it. We need to let people understand what it means to get a vehicle that needs to be charged, and work with not only the car dealers, but electric equipment supply manufacturers, all those. So that's what that $2 million goes to, all that kind of work. With an existing program with Drive Electric Vermont, which has a really good website if you ever want to check it out about all the different incentives and work that we're doing in this area. Section 6 makes some changes to the incentives to electric vehicles that I talked about at the beginning of Section 5. Right now, if the electric vehicle or the plug-in electric vehicle costs more, or the manufactured suggested retail price is over $40,000, you don't qualify for incentive. So you can't get an $80,000, Tesla or BMW and get the incentive. However, we found that as prices are escalating, there was a lot of four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive electric vehicles that we think would be very popular with Vermonters that were just over the $40,000 manufactured retail price. So we're increasing it for electric vehicles to $45,000 to incorporate some of these new all-wheel drive vehicles that are coming on the market. But we're keeping the plug-in hybrids, electric hybrids, at $40,000. So those are my first 6 sections. Madam President, I would like to yield to Senator from Essex Orleans, Senator Ingram.
Senator from Essex Orleans, recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 7, Vermont Association of Snow Travelers authorizes the DMV to spend $50,000 in one-time general fund monies and grants to VASS to support the law enforcement and safety programs, and $750,000 in one-time general fund monies and grants to VASS to support the equipment grant in aid program. Section 8, it's a bridge formula program for off-system bridges, establishes a policy for how increased federal funds available because of the IIJA for off-system bridges will be used to fully cover construction. All off-system bridges in the FY23 transportation programs for town highway bridges that were not authorized for federal funds for the construction phase prior to the FY23 transportation program and 2 are either listed as a front of book project or a development and evaluation project, and all off-system covered bridges and historic trust bridges in FY23 through FY29 based on the statutory prioritization, with a balance of available funds going to town highway bridges advanced based on the statutory prioritization. Section 9 is the Town Highway Bridge Program makes necessary changes to add covered bridges and historic trust bridges to the candidate list and town highway bridges. Section 10, Program Development, reduction in program development by $54,211 to make up for miscalculations based on timing for the minimum town highway aid appropriation authorization. And then in section 11, increases in town highway aid by $54,211 to match the statutory appropriation. Section 12, Policy and Planning, increase in policy and planning monies by nearly $3.4 million to cover the full $4.25 million for level 3 charges along state highways. Section 13, Town Highway changes in Class 2 roadways, directs the agency to carry forward not less than $866,500 of expended fiscal year 2022 appropriations and designates those monies for grants awards under the Town Highway Structures Program and not less than $951,250,000 of unexpended fiscal year 2022 appropriations and designates those monies for grant awards under the Town Highway Class 2 roadway programs so as to meet the statutory minimums as increased in the 2021 T-bill. I would now like to yield to the senior senator from Caledonia.
Senior Senator from Caledonia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. These sections, of course, relate to money, and I seem to have an affinity for money. The first is of recognizing the DMV IT project, which is in the process of getting modernized. And this is funding that project using ARPA dollars. We also, remember from the budget discussion, created an IT fund within the Agency of Digital Services. And so the appropriation here is being made to digital services for the support of this project. That's section 14. In section 15 and 16, what we ended up doing is not funding the proposed subsidies to purchase electric ATVs and snow machines, but instead felt we could benefit more Vermonters and advance our climate goal by putting the money into microtransit and into public transit. So those sections, we increased the funding because we felt that that was more strategic investments toward that end. Then section 17, there have been numerous studies in the past, and that has to do with the governance of the Burlington International Airport, which happens to be located in the city of South Burlington. Testimony around the current governance structure. There was concern about how that structure did not, from other towns' perspective, adequately reflect the impact that the airport had on such as Winooski or Williston, or obviously the host community of South Burlington. So we had money in this section, I will say, is being amended, and I will present the amendment when I present the report from your appropriations committee. It's to take another look at the current governance structure and to how it should or should not be modified. And the section 18, federal funding that is coming down. There is funding under the carbon reduction program, and we said to align how those monies were used to support the goals that we already had included in the recommendations from our climate action plan. So that's what section 18 is basically doing. They use those federal dollars to help advance the recommendations that the state has already identified. And with that, I would like to yield to the senator from Chittenden, Senator Chittenden.
Senator from Chittenden is recognized.
Thank you. Madam President, I will be speaking to sections 19 through 45, very exciting sections that I'll do my best to keep all of your attention into the topic matter at hand. Section 19 is going to require the agency to develop a plan for updating the Vermont state standards for the design of transportation, construction, reconstruction, and rehabilitation of freeways, roads, and streets, and related documents to create context-sensitive, multimodal projects that support smart growth. It really has to do with thinking about in our roads and our road planning, e-bikes as their emerging mode of transportation, as well as pedestrians and bicycle friendliness, which is paramount in all of our discussions on transportation to allow for those modes of transportation safely through our networks. This multimodal development and delivery plan will be delivered by is from standards from March 2015, and the documents in the proposed, it will be presented for the proposed fiscal year 2024 transportation program. It also requires the agency to make staff available to the House and Senate committees on transportation for an oral presentation on the plan beginning January 15th, 2023. Section 20 has to do with the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program. It just deletes some obsolete language from prior fiscal years and requires that starting in fiscal year 24, that 50% of the Transportation Alternative Grant Program funds, federal programs and federal monies with local match will be reserved for municipalities for environmental mitigation projects related to stormwater and highways, and allocations for environmental mitigation projects account for less than 50% of the available funds. Sections 21 through 23 is really looking back at last year's T-Fund bill with some corrective language, allowing for $5,000 to be taken from the $1.5 million that was allocated to the Replace Your Ride authorization to be used to administer the bike incentive program, a rebate program to encourage people to look at that mode of transportation as another way to reduce our fossil fuel consumption and carbon emissions. Amendments 24, section 24 is an amendment also to the T-bill on the electric vehicle supply equipment grant program. What this does is, I'm learning a lot about electric charging as I'm also shopping for a plug-in vehicle, that there are level 1, level 2, and level 3 chargers. Level 3 chargers are the really fast ones that we need along our roadways, so that when you're driving on a road trip or going a far distance, you want to charge your vehicle as fast as possible. Level 2 is really, if you have the 220 amp, so it's just it's a faster charge, and those are great. We want those in as many places as possible to charge your infrastructure as quickly as possible. Level 1 can really be described as a really long extension cord. Okay, so level 1 chargers though have utility, and what we're doing with this language is making it easier, or these grants accessible to multi-unit developments that can't necessarily afford level 2 or level 3, but since they're residential units, the slower charging makes sense to just run it to where people park their car overnight. So it's just making it easier to have more infrastructure, easily, less expensive, deployable infrastructure to serve the electric vehicles that are coming onto the market. Section 25 is a bicycle and pedestrian planning integration program. It's establishing a program to support continued development of the build out of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and requires the consultation between the agency and the regional planning commissions. Sections 26 through 34, I'm just going to lump together. This is a lot of cleanup language, basically big picture. It just makes conforming revisions to Titles 5 and 9 in response to Amendment 19 VSA Subchapter 5C, which was made in 2016 Acts and Resolves number 167, Section 6, to provide that in virtually all instances of appeals from the Transportation Board, they go to the Supreme Court. Please don't ask me any questions about these sections. Section 35. Did I say that out loud? My apologies, President. Section 35, Transportation Board. This is just adding clarifying language, including subsection headings to 19 VSA 5, the statute that was amended in 2016 as well, thereby necessitating the conforming revisions. Again, some cleanup language brought to us from the agency. Section 36 is the repeal of assessment language. This repeals Title 5 and Chapter 5, which is now obsolete because the common carrier assessment in 5 VSA Subchapter 63 was repealed in 1988, but the balance of the chapter 5 VSA Subchapter 64 to 67 with administrative provisions was not. So again, some cleanup language. On-premise signs. This one's kind of interesting. So this amends 10 VSA Subchapter 493(1) for the allowance of on-premise signs to measure from the distance from the on-premise sign to the main entrance. Based on a straight line, a line of sight, and not a line measured along the central line of the highway if the change in elevation from the sign to the main entrance is more than 100 feet. For businesses that have elevated locations, this just makes it more flexible for where they can put their sign based on where you can, if you can see the main entrance from the road or not, regardless of how the road meanders. It again comes to us from the agency. Section 38 is a right-of-way 1111 permit fees, 19 VSA 1112, subchapter 1112. Big picture, it really just amends the law to only assess the 1111 permit fee for stormwater utility connections that are subsurface and only for the collective direct connection to the state highway subsurface stormwater system and not each direct connection individually. This change will make statute align with what VTrans says is already currently in place. Section 39, these are changes that site plan review, so it changes a shall to a may, so it goes from mandatory language to permissive and strikes an any based on the agency's concerns after a period of implementation of changes made in the last T-bill surrounding needing to include all permit conditions in letters to local development review boards, even ones that are standard. This just allows for more flexibility so that if there's a sequence of permit acquisition, they don't have to double back to make our permitting process related to our state highways somewhat more allowing or permissive of the sequence of when things go through their process. Section 40, an interesting one. I don't know about you all, but during the pandemic, I was looking for lots of things to do in the great state of Vermont and exploring different stretches. I remember last summer, I was waiting in traffic for quite some time, trying to get through the the notch between the two mountains. You might have hear this on the radio every now and then, but every now and then a very brave soul that doesn't quite read all of the signs we have up there will try to navigate a large vehicle through the notch. This is meant to address some of those concerns. It's making changes to existing law to have the civil penalty be assessed against the employer or of the operator of the vehicle that violates the statute or the driver if they are their self-employer, and have the vehicle prohibition be based on length rather than type of vehicle. My colleague from the senator from Washington will be introducing an amendment to this language, and I'll allow him to speak to clarity on that point. Section 41 is the repeal of authority to restrict the use of covered bridges. So you'll see this in the next 3 sections. We are not taking away the rights. We're just making them cleaner and more consistent for local towns to restrict uses of covered bridges. So this repeals municipal authority to restrict the use of covered bridges, but we just add it back in section 45. So again, similarly with section 42, we're repealing the penalties of violating covered bridge restrictions in 19 VSA. And then we are also redesignating section headings based on those changes. This is 43 through 44. 45, my last section, is in fact on the municipal authority that is reinstating that authority to regulate covered bridges, but modifying it in 23 VSA to allow a municipality or multiple municipalities jointly where the covered bridge connects 2 of them in consultation with V-Trans to establish one or more of the following weight, height, or width limits on covered bridges, but it also requires that any limits be permanently posted with signs that conform to the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD, which is referenced in 23 VSA, Section 25 in specific locations. At this time, Madam President, if I may, I would like to yield to the Senator from Essex Orleans, Senator Ingalls.
Senator from Essex Orleans is recognized.
Section 46 is a certified statement. 23 VSA Section 1398 makes technical corrections and adds in requirements that a certified statement of limits for covered bridges also be filed with the clerk in that municipality. Section 47 deals with weight limits, restrictions, exclusions, expands the exclusion for the municipal and volunteer fire apparatuses that can be operated in excess of weight limitations to also include law enforcement motor vehicles. Section 48 is the agricultural service vehicles exemption. It exempts agricultural service vehicles from prohibition on operating in excess of covered bridge limits. Section 49, operating in excess of limits, it establishes the following civil penalties for operating in violation of posted limits for a covered bridge or general limits for certain types of bridges. $1,000 for a first violation, $2,000 for a first violation that substantially impedes the flow of traffic, and doubled for a second or a subsequent conviction within a 3-year period. Section 50, liabilities for damages, upgrades very outdated internal citations and adds subsection 1434C to the list of violations that trigger liability for damages to the public highways or bridges. Section 51, the repeal of ability to recover expense for emergency services related to closed roads, repeals abilities to recover expenses for emergency services related to closed roads, but added back as part of 24 VSA subsection 2296A. And that's also in Section 52, recovers for expense for emergency services, allows a municipality that deploys a service vehicle, deploys a rescue services to aid stranded operators or more disabled vehicles to recover from the operator or operator's employees, provided that the operator was acting during or intentional to the operator's scope of employment. It tracks case law on respondents superior, the cost of providing rescue services. Section 53, filing of restrictions, eliminates the requirement that municipalities file a complete copy of the list of special weight limits for roads in a municipality by February 10th of each year. And with that, Madam President, I'd like to yield back to the Senator from Washington.
Senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. So I will go over the last few sections here. Section 54 is connected to sections 55 and 56. This deals with basically using of recycled materials in transportation projects. We have snuck in some findings here on section 54, which kind of just lay the groundwork of why it's important that we try to support specifically the glass recycling markets in Vermont. Section 55 takes some old statute that deals with RAF, recycled asphalt pavement. It deletes some old language that we don't need anymore. And then in section 56, in subsection D, subsection C, that RAF language is in this section, section 56, which is an establishment of a policy or a goal for our agency of transportation to use this recycled components in the transportation projects as much as they can, encourages them to do more research and testing, and it requires them to kind of report back to us every year on how that's going. Section 57 deals with the charging of charging. This is the state of Vermont owns some EVSE chargers that we do not charge the public for those. So if any legislators have an electric vehicle, they're charging for free at those chargers that we have out here in front of the State House. This, when we looked at this several years ago, we said the state should really figure that out. Should they be charging for this charging? You know, are we losing money? What's the situation? We said, please come back to us in 2022 with kind of a plan for that. they said, well, we're not quite ready. Things are changing a lot in this space. So we said, okay, that's fine. Come back in 2025 to report how you're going to deal with this going forward. That's section 58 is the section 57 was just moving the date. Section 58 kind of deals with specifics about the state and the agency of transportation, buildings and general services, how they charge for charging. And that they have to report every year between now and 2025 on what their thinking is, what's the best way to go forward with this. There's different models that they could do, private partnerships, charging it, not charging. So that's what we'll be hearing every year. Section 59 gives the state and the town of St. Albans, city of St. Albans, another 10 years to work on a little piece of road that was to be known as Vermont Route 207 extension. That extension was never built, but that piece of road is still under control by the state. St. Albans is thinking about taking control of it, but they're kind of need more time. So we've given them another 10 years to kind of figure out under whose jurisdiction that will be, St. Albans, the town of St. Albans, or the state. Section 60 repeals a fine that was dealt with, it repeals the fine. It was a violation that dealt with parking on state highways. That got moved years ago, but the fine was still around, so we repealed that. Section 61 repeals a provision from 2017. All these sections that I'm doing now, sections 60 through 62, are codified law technical corrections. So section 61 repeals this provision from 2017, and section 62 deletes a report that was due in 2011, which I assume we read. Section 63 is the effective dates, which you'll notice almost all of them are effective on the fiscal year, July 1st. There's a few of the sections 21 through 24 that dealt with the incentive programs. For administrative purposes, we're making those retroactively effective to the beginning of this fiscal year. And that section about the little bit of roadway in St. Albans, who's going to take jurisdiction over that, takes effect upon passage. So, Madam President, those are the sections of the bill. I will yield back to the senator from Grand Isle, give the committee vote and wrap up this 30-second transportation bill.
The senator from Grand Isle, the chair of the committee, is recognized.
Madam President, like I said earlier, it was a great pleasure to report this bill. Everyone here, their towns or communities will be very pleased with the funding. It affects every town and community in Vermont. They all got a piece of this action. So it's a good bill because we haven't had it in many, many years. But a special thanks, which wouldn't have happened if I didn't thank Anthea Dexter Cooper of Legislative Council, Chris Roop, JFO, Michelle Boomhauer from AOT, and all the staff at AOT, Jeannie Lowell, committee assistant, and many others who participated in this. The vote was 5-0-0, and I think that covers it. Oh, as you know, our senator from Caledonia, Senator Kitchell, takes care of the finances. And the budget was $832 million. I think she found $1.36 off. And so we all pitched in and put it in there. So and that's accurate within our budget. Thank you very much. And I hope the Senate will concur. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Franklin, Senator Brock, is recognized for the report of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Finance reviewed the bill. There were several sections that affected revenues. Generally speaking, there were solely technical corrections or adjustment of language to conform with existing practice. There was one new charge or fee in the bill that related to violations on covered bridges, and we felt that the effect on that on the revenues of the state was de minimis. The committee recommends the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal amendment as recommended by the Committee on Transportation, and the committee vote was 6-0-1. Thank you.
The senator from Caledonia is now recognized, Senator Kitchell, for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam President. The amendment can be found on page 2988, and it refers to the Burlington International Airport study. In the Section 17, we had funded the cost of that study, which was estimated at $150,000 out of the $500,000 appropriation budget that would go to the airport for match to draw down federal dollars. Additional information was available that indicated FAA would underwrite the cost of governance studies, and the match would be 90% federal, 10% state, which would mean then the state share was only $15,000. And we felt that in light of the fact that this study was being done, it was not being initiated by the city of Burlington, that we would ask the agency to find the $15,000 required match within the aviation budget, and that's what this amendment does. The Appropriations Committee vote to move the bill favorably as amended was 6-0-1. Thank you.
The first question is, shall the report of the Committee on Transportation be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've amended the report as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations. I believe there's a calendar amendment offered by the Senator from Washington. Senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I would also ask permission to read through 125 witnesses that we had on the T-bill. If anybody wants to see this list, that includes 49 staff members for the Agency of Transportation. We hear from everybody that has all the different sections of all the work that the agency does. So 125 witnesses list is here for your reading pleasure. So the amendment that you'll find on page 2989 is just some corrections that we saw after the bill passed out of committee. First is just a changing of a section heading is the first order of amendment to add the words the carbon reduction program, because we made that change to the section, so we wanted the section heading to reflect that. The second order of amendment, this is to deal with the amendment that the Senator from Chittenden mentioned, dealing with smuggler's notch. We wanted to make sure the employer of somebody operating a vehicle that got stuck was responsible, but not if the employee was not working for the owner of the vehicle at the time that they got stuck. So if they take their semi-truck for a joyride on the weekend, the employer is not responsible. So that's the technical correction and second order of amendment. The third order of amendment was with the section that Senator from Chittenden talked about with covered bridges. We have issues with covered bridges also having too large vehicles trying to get through them. This just makes clear that if the truck that's not allowed to go on the covered bridge stops before the covered bridge, they're not in violation. They need to be in excess of the legal limits of where their truck is parked at the time. So those are the three instances of amendment. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Transportation be amended as moved by the Senator from Washington? And are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've amended the proposal of amendment as proposed by the committee, by the Senator from Washington and others, excuse me. The Senator from Chittenden is now recognized for his amendment, which I believe is a floor amendment. And does everyone have that now? Just give a moment for that to be circulated. Senator from Chittenden is recognized.
So I'll start talking, and it's a very short amendment. So when it comes, so this is something, as many of you might know, I do serve on another local municipal body. I am a South Burlington City Councilor. So this was brought to me as something that you might have seen in the headlines of late, which has to do with a municipally owned airport inside of the town of South Burlington, the city of South Burlington, which was having issues with parking requirements set at the local level, which required that parking be behind the building. facility. When that local ordinance was passed by the city of South Burlington, the South Burlington City Council land development regulations were not considerate of entities like an airport, where parking vehicles behind a building would be on an airfield where the planes go. So this language has come to us as recommended from a variety of sources. That has percolated after, a little bit before as well, since we passed the T-bill out of committee. The Senate Transportation Committee did meet this morning, and it's not coming from the committee, but all 5 members of the Senate Transportation Committee are joining me with this very short amendment, which specifically says, very narrowly crafted, that notwithstanding 1 VSA 213, that no bylaw adopted under this chapter shall regulate the location of parking facilities at or adjacent to a municipally owned and operated airport. Very important, municipally owned. This does not affect state-owned airports. So it's very narrow and has effective dates, and it is not necessarily targeted towards any specific company, but it has relevance towards companies trying to build and production facilities adjacent to an airfield municipally owned. The vote, there was no vote. There was just 5 people.
The question is, shall the Senate amend the report as amended, as recommended by the senator from Chittenden and others? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and you've amended the report of the Committee on Transportation as amended, as recommended by the senator from Chittenden and others. The question now is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Are you ready for the question? The senator from Windham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to inquire of the senator from Washington on one of his sections, and then I'd like to inquire of the senator from Caledonia on her section.
You may.
So I just, in his report, the senator from Washington used a term, and I wonder if it might be considered an oxymoron, charging for free.
Thank you, Madam President. I would not say it's an oxymoron because we're using the charging in the sense that we're providing an electrical charge to the vehicle, and we would be providing those electrons, no monetary charge of the person's getting the electrons for the vehicle.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the clarification. I would like to, thank you. I would like to inquire of the senator from Caledonia about section 17, which is the airport study. So I read the, thank you, I read the duties and what they were going to study. And my question is, in Senate Government Operations, we took a little bit of testimony on this when we were dealing with the Burlington charter change. And I wonder if their study could go as far as to look at whether this should actually remain a municipal airport or if it should be recategorized as a regional or state airport. Would that be, could that be part of the study?
Thank you, Madam President. That, in fact, is very much a part of the study. It's recognized that it's owned by the city of Burlington, and we took testimony from public officials from the neighboring town, feeling that the current structure did not really reflect the regional impact and the economic impact, as well as environmental and other impacts of the airport. We are not prejudging. We don't know what the legal considerations might be, but absolutely that is one of the, that would be one of the areas that would be examined by this study.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm happy to hear that.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Are you ready for the question? The senator from Windham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I love when we pass the T-bill every year. It really speaks to all of the parts of our lives, from repairing frost heaves and potholes to snow travelers and VAST, park and ride, bike and pedestrian facilities, micro transit, e-bikes, covered bridges, and of course, paving. But I also love it because every Friday when I go home, I get the same question from my kids, and that's, did you pass any good laws today? That's always the question at dinner. And this bill is going to be such a hit tonight because I have a son who is so obsessed with the state of our bridges in this state. And every day he gives me the report on where he's been traveling on the way home from school and under what bridges and what conditions they're in. So I'm going to be able to say to him today, yes, we passed some good laws today, and they are going to repair those bridges you are so concerned about. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bills recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read for the third time? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 736.
Madam President.
The senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Thank you. At this time, I ask that the rules be suspended and that we place the transportation bill in all remaining stages of passage. That would be H 737.
The senator from Wyndham has moved that the rules be suspended and H 736 be placed in all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you suspended the rules and placed H 736 in all remaining stages of passage. We now on the calendar for third reading, H 736. Third reading was just ordered. Are there any amendments for third reading? Please listen to the third reading of H 736.
H 736. An act relating to the transportation program and miscellaneous changes to laws related to transportation.
The question now is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question?
Roll call, please.
The senator from Rutland has requested a roll call vote. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? The secretary is kindly asked to call the roll.
Senator Ballant.
Yes.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Benning.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collimore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Hooker.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
Yes.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Nitka.
Yes.
Senator Parent.
Yes.
Senator Pearson. Senator Perschlick. Yes. Senator Polina.
Yes.
Senator Rahm Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Sirotkin.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Terenzini.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Perschlick. Senator Pearson.
Please listen to the results of your vote. The yeas 29, the nays 0, and you've passed H 736. The senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, I ask that the rules be suspended and we message our actions on H 736 to the House forthwith.
The senator from Wyndham has moved that the rules be suspended and H 736 be messaged to the House forthwith. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended the rules and messaged to the House forthwith on H 736. We will now move to S 254, an act relating to recovering damages for Article 11 violations by law and a report on qualified immunity. The House has proposed to the Senate to amend the bill as set forth on pages 2989 to 2991 of today's calendar. And the underlying question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment on S 254? And the senator from Bennington, Senator Sears, is recognized for the report of the Committee on Judiciary.
Madam President, the other body took up S 254 as passed the Senate. I described it when I did the original report on S 254 on qualified immunity as seriously watered down version. I described in committee the House version of 254 as a flooded version. And President, what the other body did was strike Section 1 in its entirety, replace it with Section 2, which requires drafting of a legal analysis on the access to civil justice remedies, qualified immunity in Vermont. Your Senate Judiciary Committee took testimony on the changes to the bill, which I will detail in a moment. And we ultimately concur with the proposal, but with further proposal of amendment. As a reminder, Section 1 of the bill passed by the Senate codified the 2019 Vermont Supreme Court decision of Zulo v. State so that it would apply uniformly to Article 11 actions brought against any law enforcement agency in the state of Vermont. The House proposal amendment redesignated Section 2 of the bill as Section 1, which provided for a report on qualified immunity drafted by the Office of Legislative Counsel. The proposal keeps the majority of the report that your Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate passed to the House as passed by the Senate, but it expands the scope and clarifies some language to confine the report to an objective legal analysis, and also explores the impact of the doctrine of qualified immunity on access to civil justice remedies, both in the state of Vermont and the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit, which encompasses Vermont. The House proposal adds a few more topics to be analyzed in the report. After discussion in your Senate Judiciary Committee, the majority of the committee felt that we continue to find it important to know how many judgments and settlements are paid by law enforcement agencies. Therefore, we propose adding a new section 2370 to Title 20, requiring law enforcement agencies to disclose, keep a record of all claims related to alleged violations of constitutional rights established under Vermont law. These records will be subject to public disclosure unless an exemption applied under the Vermont Public Records Act. And when disclosed, the record of judgment or settlement would include the name of the law enforcement agency and the monetary amount paid. This is very similar to the record of case dispositions that was included in your original version of S-254 that the Senate passed. Finally, your Senate Judiciary Committee would further propose to change the name of the title to better reflect the contents of the bill. As a result of these considerations, I ask for your support in concurring with House amendment, with further amendment, as I just described, and that amendment has been handed out, and you have it before you, and the record of the case disposition. The vote in committee was 3-1-1 to concur with further proposals. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Before I call the question, I just want to ensure that everyone has received a copy of the amendment. The question then is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment with a further proposal of amendment as proposed by the senator from Bennington? The senator from Chittenden is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. May I inquire of the reporter of the proposed amendment?
You may.
Senator, was there any testimony taken on whether there would be an impact of a non-disclosure agreement on settlements?
At the time, not on this particular version, but at the time in committee, we did have, and we didn't feel that it would be because we're only asking for the amount of the agency and the amount of the settlement, which has generally been fairly public knowledge.
I'm not an expert on these matters, but it seems to me that sometimes in non-disclosure agreements, they prohibit the disclosure of the amount of the settlement itself.
Well, if they did, then we wouldn't be able to get that information. We would know that there was a settlement reached. At least in my experience, 3 recent cases in the town of Bennington resulted in the disclosure of the monetary amount, but not the details.
One of the reasons why I asked this question is we're dealing with other bills where we're making provisions of non-disclosure agreements illegal. So it is possible, if we really want to get at the amount of the settlements here, we could go further and force the disclosure of an amount that's subject to a non-disclosure agreement.
I ask for a brief recess, Madam President.
Senate will stand in recess until the call of the chapter. Senate will order. We are returning from a brief recess, and the senator from Bennington has the floor.
Madam President, thank you for the recess, and I hope that we've answered the questions to the senator from Chittenden, and basically making clear that we may not know the amount of the settlement, but in many cases, and if that's not available and it's not disclosed, then we won't have that information. But our attempt really is, during our testimony in Senate Judiciary on qualified immunity, one of the basic arguments that we continued to hear from municipal agencies as well as our state police was, there is not a problem in Vermont. There are settlements, and people are able to take their grievances to the courts. We merely are looking to have that information to build on should the legislature come back and deal with the issue of qualified immunity. In the report section, as it passed the House, there is looking at centralized databases that may be available in other states and reporting back on that as well. While this particular section doesn't have a centralized database, it doesn't request that, it requests merely that each municipal agency and the state agencies keep a track of any settlement. Hope that answers the question, Madam President.
Senator from Chittenden is recognized.
President, I thank the senator from Bennington for taking the brief recess and explaining that we will have the information, at least as to the number of settlements, which is important to address the problem of that people saying there's no problem in the state of Vermont.
The question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment with a further proposal of amendment as proposed by the senator from Bennington? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
No.
Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you concur with the House proposal of amendment with a further proposal of amendment as proposed by the senator from Bennington. We have on the calendar for third reading, H 399, an act relating to incarceration terms for criminal defendants who are primary caretaker of dependent children. Third reading was ordered on April 21st. Are there any amendments before third reading? Please listen to the third reading of H 399.
H 399, an act relating to incarceration terms for criminal defendants or primary caretakers of dependent children.
The question now is, shall the bill pass in concurrence? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and you've passed H 399 in concurrence. We have on the calendar for action H 711, an act relating to the creation of the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee and the Opioid Abatement Special Fund. Read for the first time on March 23rd. It was referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the bill be amended as set forth 2991, 2992 of today's calendar, and that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which reports the bill should be amended as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare, that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of H 711.
H 711, an act relating to the creation of the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee and the Opioid Abatement Special Fund.
The senator from Chittenden, Senator Lyons, is recognized for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare.
Thank you, Madam President. May I speak to the underlying bill as well as the proposed amendment?
You may.
Thank you. We're all aware of the ongoing opioid epidemic, and it's been going on for many years. The pharmaceutical industry has been implicated in encouraging and allowing for the opioid epidemic to affect so many people in our state and across the country. H711 is a bill that will bring to the state significant revenue as a result of a settlement against, in a lawsuit against McKeeson, Cardinal, and AmerisourceBergen. The settlement was reached last summer, and many of us did receive the settlement, which was comprehensive and very instructive about how the state might proceed once the state begins to receive funding. There will be approximately $64 million, which will be allocated to the state of Vermont in settlement over approximately 18 years. Our Attorney General's office has been very much engaged and involved with this and has been extremely helpful in helping us to translate the settlement language into the legislation that you have before you. The settlement that will come to the state will be allocated in 3 buckets. 15% of the $64 million will go to state subdivisions and used to abate the opioid crisis. That will be the subdivision fund. 15% of the $64 million that will come to the state will be used to remediate for past expenses of the opioid crisis, and that's referred to as the state fund. 70% of the $64 million will be sent to a statewide abatement fund it will be called the abatement fund. H711 focuses on the 70% set aside for the opioid abatement fund. And the use of the fund is very much limited by the terms of the national settlement. So as our counterparts in the other body went through and developed the bill, and as I worked with others in the administration and in the other body in discussing how to proceed with a bill in the summer and in the fall, we are very much bound to the settlement conditions that we have received from the Attorney General's office. We know that substance use disorders are far-reaching and all too often tragic. They provide terrible impacts on families and communities, and no amount of money is sufficient to compensate those who have lost a loved one. This bill presents a historic opportunity for Vermont to increase investments in opioid prevention, intervention, treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and evaluation activities. As I go through the bill, Madam President, I will identify where our proposal of amendment will be located. But I think it is important for us to understand what this bill will do, what it does do, because as we go forward, we will be receiving recommendations for the expenditure of funds associated with opioid prevention, intervention, treatment, therapies. Section 4771 provides that the purpose of the chapter is to comply with any opioid litigation settlements to which the state or municipalities were a party regarding the management and expenditures of money received by the state. The subchapter recognizes that there are multiple buckets of money within the national settlement, and that H711 is focusing on the money set aside for opioid abatement. Section 4772 creates the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee, and that committee will reflect the diversity of Vermont in terms of gender, race, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability status, and socioeconomic status, and ensure inclusion of individuals with lived experience of opioid use disorder and their family members whenever possible. The advisory committee will provide advice and recommendations regarding remediation and spending from the opioid abatement fund, which is being established pursuant to the subchapter. The national settlement is very clear about the components of the advisory committee, stating representation from state and municipal organizations. Subsection 4772 represents the advisory committee, and this is where our first proposal of amendment is located. It's on page 4 of the bill that you have in front of you, and we've simply corrected the name of the Substance Misuse Advisory Council that currently exists within the Department of Health. And so it will be the Substance Misuse Oversight, Prevention, and Advisory Council. That's the first instance of amendment. The spending priorities for our opioid work in the state will be directed or at least recommended by the advisory committee that you see listed before you. And then we'll make recommendations to the governor, the Department of Health, and the General Assembly. It's very clear that the advisory committee is only that. None of the recommendations are binding. But one of the things that is clear is that the recommendations will be made, come back to the General Assembly so that when appropriations are made, they may be in context with those recommendations to the extent practicable. Subsection 4772E requires that the advisory committee present their recommendations to the Department of Health, the House Committees on Appropriations and on Human Services, and Senate Committees on Appropriations and Health and Welfare. The Department of Health will be, the reason the Department of Health is mentioned is it will be the lead entity in the state for making final recommendations through the budget process for the expenditure of the funds that are in the monies that are in the abatement fund. Section 4773 does that. It designates the Department of Health. Section 4774 creates the Opioid Abatement Special Fund, and this on page 7 is our second instance of amendment. We have essentially taken out two sections, 1 and 2, and replaced it with one section that describes what the fund is and that the money will be placed in that fund. Again, this, and we'll see a later amendment that's in the calendar that more fully defines specifically that it is an abatement fund and not an abatement fund administrator who is sending the funds out once they are. Subdivision 4772A2 requires the Department of Health to produce an annual budget and submit that budget during the budget process. And this is all specified within the settlement fund guidelines. Subdivision 4774 states that disbursement from the fund will supplement, not supplant or replace any existing or future local, state, and federal government funding for infrastructure programs, support, and resources, including health insurance benefits, federal grant funding, and Medicaid and Medicare funds. So very explicit about the use of these funds, which we will look at in just a minute. Subsection 4774B includes activities for which the expenditures from the fund can be used, shall be used, and the use of funds is prescribed by the terms, again, of the national settlement. So it allows for a variety of uses that are listed in the bill to support folks for treatment of opioid use disorder, individuals in treatment and recovery, connecting individuals to needed services, addressing the needs of criminal justice involved persons, addressing the needs of pregnant or parenting individuals, preventing overprescribing, and so on. Subsection 4774 lists priorities for expenditures aimed at reducing overdose deaths, including promoting the appropriate use of naloxone and other FDA-approved drugs to reverse opioid overdoses, increasing access to MAT, medication-assisted treatment, and other opioid-related treatments, assisting pregnant and postpartum individuals, expanding treatment for neonatal abstinence syndrome, which has been seen as an issue in this state, and expanding the availability of warm handoff programs and recovery services. Section 2 of the bill prescribes the sunset of the advisory group, and that on page 13 is our third instance of amendment. where we have again substituted language that that you saw previously describing the fund itself. Well, we'll see that in the next amendment, I should say, but the third amendment does change the name of the fund. We kept hearing updated information from our Attorney General's office, so that's why we have the proposed amendment in front of you, and then we have a subsequent amendment in the calendar. Madam President, we did hear from the House reporter. We did work, I worked independently for the summer and fall with folks from the administration, including the Chief Prevention Officer, the Attorney General's office, and some legal counsel in the governor's office, as well as our Attorney General, and as well as our House counterparts. Our committee heard from the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, from the Chief Prevention Officer in the Office of the Governor, Legislative Counsel, and we relied on the good work that has come to us in the House bill, knowing that there is a prescription to be made for this legislation from the national settlement. So, Madam President, that is the report of the committee. We know how dire the current situation is, opioid misuse, and we look forward to having an opportunity to utilize these funds going forward to attenuate the problems that we see in our state. So thank you, Madam President.
Senator from Caledonia is recognized for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam President. The Appropriations Committee looked at the two aspects of the bill. One, of course, is the creation of a special fund, recognizing that there would be multiple settlements and funding streams coming into the fund. And the other is the advisory committee. We had some discussion around the composition of the committee, but we quickly realized that so much of what is here is actually constrained by what is required under the settlements. So the also the cost of the advisory committee would be an allowable expenditure under the fund. So the impact on the state budget and general funds there was none, and the vote in committee was 5-0-2 in support of the bill as amended by Senate Health and Welfare.
Senator Lyons and others have a recommendation of an amendment, from the Committee on Health and Welfare, and it's found on page 2993 of today's calendar.
Thank you, Madam President. This is really a technical correction in a couple of places in the bill. So correcting the name of the fund. So the National Settlement Fund will replace the National Settlement Fund Administrator. There's not a designated administrator in the settlement, so it's the fund that we will have in the state. And it will allow for, just an aside comment, having the fund in place will also allow for additional settlement monies related to opioid misuse to come into the state and to be fully utilized as in the bill. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare be amended as moved by the Senator from Chittenden and others? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've amended the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare as moved by the Senator from Chittenden and others. The question now is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare as amended? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read for the third time? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 111. This does now complete the orders of the day. The senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Madam President, announcements. I move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 1 p.m. on Monday, April 25th. By way of explanation, Madam President, it will be a token session. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Wyndham has moved that, subject to any announcements, the Senate do adjourn until Monday, April 25th at 1 p.m. Are there any announcements? And before I recognize the senator from Wyndham, I will add that next week Senate sessions will begin at 10 a.m. after Monday. The senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Senate Government Operations will be 15 minutes after the fall of the gavel.
The senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Senate Finance will meet at 2:10.
Senator from Bennington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Senate Education will meet at 2:10.
Senator from Caledonia is recognized.
Madam President, Senate institutions will not be meeting this afternoon. I expect to see you all at the St. Albans Maple Festival Parade on Sunday. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Addison is recognized.
Madam President, Senate Natural Resources and Energy will meet Monday at 3 p.m.
Senator from Windsor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. 2204-2022. Today, we celebrate Earth Day. It was established on this day in 1970, and we also celebrate on this day the birthday of our own colleague, Senator Sears, who was established a few years earlier. He shares this day with these auspicious events and characters. In 1964, the World's Fair opened in New York City. And in 2016, the Paris Agreement was signed. In 1904, Robert J. Oppenheimer, the great American physicist and academic, was born. And in 1922, Charles Mingus, the great American bassist, composer, and band leader, was born. And finally, Senator Sears shares his birthday with an American icon, the actor Jack Nicholson, who was born in 1937. I hope they celebrate equally humorfully today. Happy birthday, Senator Sears.
Are there any additional announcements? Senator from Caledonia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry that Senator Sears has to work on his birthday, but we 7 bills out yesterday. We still have more. I would ask the committee to grab their lunch, and we will convene as soon as everybody gets there and we will work over lunch. Thank you.
I do have an announcement on behalf of the Committee on Committees. We have a committee of conference to announce on House Bill H 740, an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government. The 3 members of the committee of conference are as follows: Senator Kitchell, Senator Baruth, and Senator Westman. Are there any additional announcements? The senator from Wyndham has moved that the Senate adjourn until Monday, April 25th at 1 p.m. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate stands adjourned